Hi, I'm Mike from the Genuine Chit Chat podcast, and you're listening to Comics in Motion.
This body, it has the power I need. I feel a connection to it I can't explain. This could be who I am.
You've been given a chance to start over with a clean slate. How many of us get that?
I get an enemy warship respond to me.
Welcome, everyone. This is episode 60 of the Comics in Motion show. I am Chris Phelps, and my co-host and good friend is Mr. Dave Horrocks.
Hi, Chris, and hello to our listeners out there. Welcome to the Comics in Motion podcast. What we like to do here is we like to review media like movies and TV shows that are based on comic books. Myself, I'll be reviewing from the perspective of a long-time comic book fan.
And I'll be reviewing from the TV and film perspective.
And what we also like to do, we also like to spoil the hell out of everything we review. So if you haven't watched our choice of the week, then we'd advise you to proceed with caution. And remember, with an average podcast comes no responsibility.
I didn't even expecting.
Did you forget about that one?
Brilliant, Dave. Brilliant. Yeah, brilliant. Sorry.
So, I just want to say, before we get going on what's happening this week, so I just want to say thanks to all our new listeners out there. We've been featured on Podbean for the last few weeks, and so we've had a little spike in new listeners and new downloads. So, thanks to everyone, old listeners, new listeners. Glad to have you all on board.
Oh, it's been good. God,
Chris, I love, on all our social media channels, I do appreciate all of our followers, but I had a little bit of a geekgasm this week. So we were followed by Lenore Zan, who I'm not going to put you on the spot, but I'm sure you know is the voice of Rogue in the X-Men animated series back in the 90s.
Yep, and as I've mentioned many times, Dave, that is one of my favourite cartoon versions of, the X-Men or anything superhero-ish. So, yeah, and I've got to say, as much as this may sound totally wrong, that voice was synonymous with my youth and watching cartoons, because she's got a really, really intriguing pitch and tone to her voice that you'll never, ever miss with that character, Dave. So, yeah, great. When you sent it to me, I was so pleased. I was like, oh, yes. Well, we can say we've made it, Dave, but we've made something anyway, haven't we? So,
intriguing isn't the first word. I'm not sure what word I'd choose, but I would say it made a little young Dave feel very strangely about watching cartoons back in those early 90s. So
I'm so glad you said that, because I was skating around the houses, Dave. That's exactly what I was what I meant for.
But she's definitely, I mean, for a lot of people, me included, that really is the voice, the animation, everything. That's the definitive version of Rogue, really, that we've seen on any screen. I think, when we saw Anna Paquin in the 2000 X-Men, she played the part of Kitty Pryde, really. She was a very timid kind of character, whereas Rogue in the X-Men animated series was sassy and flirty, and I just can't wait until hopefully we'll get to speak to her at some point.
No, that's great stuff, Dave. And a big thanks to her as well, if she's listening, for giving us a follow, Dave. She's great. And I agree, this show wouldn't be what it is if it wasn't for the listeners and the feedback we do get from you guys. And also, if you do like the show and you haven't done it yet, guys, please subscribe to the show and also give us a 5-star review on your podcast hosting site. And it just helps us grow and improve on what we do. So we just... big thumbs up and a big thank you to all of you. And as I did say on Twitter, Dave, we send all our listeners and friends and everyone who's helped us along the way loads of Infinity Stones. Not enough to actually taken half the world away, Dave, because we only don't have half the listeners then. But, we send them out anyway. That was pretty bad, that, Dave, on it. But anyway.
I wondered where you were going off on in that rabbit hole. We love you all.
I should have just said that, son.
So, Chris, we had some expected news but sad news this week. We found out finally, so Punisher and Jessica Jones were definitely cancelled. So the final nail in the coffin, which, like I say, it was expected. but it took a few more weeks than I probably thought before it came.
Yeah, I've got to say, Dave, I totally agree with The Punisher, because obviously The Punisher's literally just been released in January, but the Jessica Jones one, I don't know why they didn't just announce that when they'd done the Daredevil and Iron Fist, Luke Cage stuff, because it's not like there was anything in development. Anyway, and the second series finished, well, it was out last year, wasn't it? Sort of middle of last year. So I found that a bit bizarre. I don't know, but it could have been a licensing thing. Maybe they were trying to save it behind the scenes. We can only speculate. But again, I hope and pray to the gods above and the Disney directors and whoever's doing this streaming thing, please do something with at least the Daredevil for me. You've got to. I'd just be so disappointed if we don't see more of Matt Murdock. And the Charlie Cox version, anyway.
Yeah, I mean, we'll definitely see Daredevil on the big screen or little screen again at some point. It's just whether it'll be the Charlie Cox version. But I thought so. Jeff Loeb came out and he had an open letter to the fans, and I thought it was really interesting. We've speculated, haven't we, about who's making this call? Is it Netflix? Is it Disney flexing their muscles? And so, from what he said, it's definitely been driven from Netflix. And Jeff's open letter to the fans confirms that, really. But I like the way he finished it off. He said, as Matt Murdock's dad once said, the measure of a man is not how he gets knocked down to the mat, it's how he gets back up. So for me, although it was a day that was, quite sad because we finally found out Punisher and Jessica Jones were definitely going to be cancelled as well, there's a bit of hope there as well, that they will be resurrected on Hulu or something like that. Yeah.
Let's hope there is, Dave, to be fair. One thing I did notice this week, which has really, really pricked my interest, which I wasn't even interested in, is the Doom Patrol extended trailer came out. Now, it was about 4.5 minutes long. It's got Timothy Dalton in, who was actually a very underrated James Bond. And we do see these characters, spoiler alert, if you haven't seen Titans, which we will be reviewing in a few weeks, they do get introduced, but I just really like the look of it, Dave, the tone of it. I just think it seems like there might be another bit of a hit on for DC there. So I don't know about you, I don't know if you've seen it, Dave, but I literally I sat there for the whole 4.5 minutes thinking, yeah, I think I can get on board on this one.
Yeah, so we're probably going to look at Titans next week, aren't we? Because it narrowly lost out to Spider-Man 77 last week on the poll. So we'll probably look at Titans next week. Now, I think is it episode 4, I'm trying to think back now, of Titans, where they come in. And I thought that was a good little introduction episode. I didn't really like the way they crowbarred it into Titans, just because within the first 4 episodes, they'd had introduction episodes to Doom Patrol and also Hawk and Dove.
Yeah.
And it was just like, just tell the story you want to tell and get your plugs in, near the end or something. But I think the Doom Patrol, because it's almost a bit X-Men-ish, isn't it? I think Doom Patrol came before. I'm trying to think. I think they did. So I don't know. I don't think there's any particular stealing one way or the other. But, that idea that not so much like Wolverine and Cyclops, who've got all these cool powers and they're on the superhero team. But, you've essentially got mutants who are, they've got some superhuman afflictions or abilities. And not necessarily the ones they want. So it'll be interesting to play with that dynamic. And, God, we've got some great shows, haven't we? So, we've had Titans, which we'll look at next week. We've got Doom Patrol, Umbrella Academy. I've got to tell you, Chris, I'm loving that. And so I think we might have to get that one in there at some point as well. You've also got Deadly Class, which was written it was a Rick Remender book that's fairly recent as well. So they just keep throwing this great TV as well as the movies at us.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm dying to watch that one, the Umbrella one, Dave, but I haven't actually finished Titans yet. So I don't want to jump from one to another. And I've only got a couple of episodes left of Titans, and I'm going to get onto it because I've actually seen a lot of good social media feedback as well on it on Twitter and Facebook, Dave. So I will definitely be starting that this weekend. So, yeah, good call.
Yeah, very good, very good. Did anything else catch your eye this week?
Yeah, they're doing the media tour for Captain Marvel. Obviously, it's due out on the 8th of March. Myself and Sam, my wife, and I'm sure yourself as well, Dave, will be going to the cinema to catch this on the day it comes out. No spoilers, because there isn't any, luckily, at the moment, which I'm really hoping does not ruin the next 10 days or so, 2 weeks before I actually go and watch it. But they've actually said that it's really showing well and it's testing well, which I think is a plus. We've speculated this over the last few weeks. It's been a bit of a theme. Is it just a stepping stone? I've personally said that. I just see it as a bit of a stepping stone. But I'm actually invested in it now, thinking, no, actually, it's going to be a bit of a good origin film. As long as it's along the same lines as Black Panther, as much as I didn't think it was an Asgard, I still enjoyed that film. So I'll be quite on board for this day. But she's doing really well, Brie Larson, and they've gone around the world promoting it. So it's at that stage now where hopefully not too many people spoil it who've already seen it, but it's looking positive anyway.
No, that's really good. And I haven't really paid too much attention, but I keep seeing these odd things about people looking to boycott it and sabotaging Rotten Tomatoes or something like that. It's like, what I don't understand what people have got against it. Is it because it's a woman?
I don't know. People are just stupid at times, Dave, aren't they? I'm sure there's someone somewhere has a reasoning behind it that justifies the way they act. But for me, it's just awful. There's no reason for it. You should just watch it for what it is. If you don't like it, I don't like it, you don't like it, then fair enough, we'll tell everybody about it. But you shouldn't do that before it's even come out. There's no reason for it. There's no controversy behind her as a person, is there? No. For example, and we're not going to get into this, but like Bryan Singer, a very, very controversial guy. Bohemian Rhapsody's lost awards because of some of that's going on with him on the legal side.
Yeah.
It's nothing to do with us, anything like that. But I would understand it if there was some sort of controversy there with something to do with this production, but there simply isn't. There's just no reason for it. But people like a bit of controversy and they love a bit of internet fighting, don't they? So it won't cloud our judgment, thankfully, anyway.
No, I mean, I absolutely, I think because of that as well, even more so, I just hope they hit it out of the park. But I tell you what, Chris, I did come across a fan theory this week. Again, I don't go looking for them, but sometimes they just land on your lap, and it actually comes back. So this isn't a spoiler because it's just all speculative theory, but it's to do with the SpiderMan trailer and Endgame.
Yeah.
So someone said, why does Spider-Man not want to take his suit when he goes away? Since we've known him, he's gone mad for his different suits, hasn't he? And he's been so excited. And when he lost his suit, he was absolutely distraught. So he loves his suits. So in that trailer, though, he didn't want to take his suit with him. Why do you think he wouldn't want to take his suit with him? Who made his suit?
Tony Stark.
So is that a little indication there about what happens to Tony in Endgame?
You've got me now, Dave. Do you mean the theory that one of them's going to die in the film?
So essentially, yeah. So he doesn't want to take his suit because he's sad about losing Tony. And Tony's the one who's made his suits for him. Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. Was there any more to that, Dave? Or was that just something that... I'd not seen that. I must admit, I've not seen any of that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. No, that was it. I mean, it's just speculation. I think, and it's almost confirmation because we've got this meta-awareness of what's happening to the actors and stuff, don't we? Gwyneth Paltrow's come out as well this week to confirm, she's done with the MCU. I think all of those Phase 1 actors probably don't have an active role going forward. So even though I'm chomping at the bit to get to Endgame, I'm kind of a bit sad because I think the likes of Tony Stark, Steve Rogers, Thor, they might all bite the dust. But let's see.
I must admit, Dave, I'll be honest with you, I have seen something else. And we literally talk about Avengers every week. I think people guess how big fans we are of that movie series, but there was something, Dave, and I don't know whether to say it. It's speculation, but there's been a couple of videos being released on YouTube about what they think is going to go on, and these rumours that there's actually another baddie or a villain that's more powerful than Thanos who's going to be in this Endgame. So we're not. It's all to do with the quantum realm. I don't know if you've seen it, and one of the cities within the quantum realm in the comics. But when I watched it, and like you say, anything can spin. So you go, oh, that makes sense. But this seemed to make a lot more sense than what I'd seen or roughly heard. I've tried to avoid a lot, as you know, but...
Yeah. I think it's, you know what, what's the saying about monkeys and typewriters? Enough monkeys and typewriters, they'll come up with the works of Shakespeare. Yeah. There's that many fan theories out there. I think I'd heard one that, like, the Thanos that we've been dealing with is not the real Thanos. He's the Thanos from an alternate universe, and there's the real Thanos going to come into it as well. I'm like, oh, come on. I'm not having that. But... and this isn't spoiling it, you know, it's there in the comics, but in the comics, it's Nebula who ends up taking hold of the Infinity Gauntlet and becoming a bigger threat than Thanos.
Ah, right.
Because Thanos has got control of it, at least. And, you know, more so in the movie than they did in the comic. He was pretty two-dimensional, I think, in the comic, but they made him kind of the hero in his own story, didn't they? And so... You know, you don't agree with what he's doing, but you can see that he's doing it for what he thinks are the right reasons.
Yeah. That's
now,
true.
If someone else who was just completely maniacal got hold of the same power, then, you know, you could even have the Avengers teaming up with Thanos.
Yeah, that has crossed my mind, Dave, I must admit.
Yeah. And I can get behind that theory because of the way they made him a bit more sympathetic than he is in the comics.
Yeah. Weird, but you're right. I agree with the monkey statement, actually, Dave. I'll just keep quiet.
No, it's good.
No, don't mean that. I'm joking. I agree. There's that many theories I've read. You just don't know. Somewhere, someone's going to stumble across something, aren't they? So
someone's going to nail it. I enjoy, like, you know, having to think about it, catching the odd theory. But also, I want to be as least spoiled as I can be going into this as well. So, you know, that's why I'm not scouring the internet, sort of looking at all the different theories, because, like I say, I'm sure there's one out there that's right.
Yeah, you're right. You're totally correct. So, we're going to go into the comic book background, Dave, but can you announce what we're going to review this week then, please?
Yep, so a little bit of a different one this week. We're going to review Alita Battle Angel. Now, this one is not that well known of a comic book series, and probably a lot of people will go along and see it and have no idea that it's based on a comic book. So for a little bit of comics background then, so this was based on a series that translates to Gundam, or Gunmu, which translates to Gun Dream. And it's also been known as Battle Angel Alita. So just same words spun around a bit. It's actually based on a Japanese cyberpunk manga series. Now, I haven't really touched manga before, but obviously across in the East there, it's absolutely huge. Now, I do have to say, my hands are up here, that most of my comic book reading has come from around kind of US and to a lesser extent UK comics. And I've not really read that much manga, but you can recognize it. You know, when it's up on screen there, it's got a very distinctive style. And when you see the artwork, it's all very, very distinctive. Now, it's created by a guy called Yukito Kishiro. No controversy around this one. We went into SpiderMan last week. A lot of controversy about how that character was created in this kind of convoluted way. But Yukito Kishiro was the man. And it ran in the Business Jump magazine, which is actually targeted at young adults. Now, again, a little bit strange. You can't imagine that the Business Jump magazine would get many people pulling it off the shelves if it was over here, would you? You know, it sounds like something your salesman would buy. The original series ran for 9 volumes from 1990 through to 1995. And the first couple and volume 4 were really used for this movie. So the first couple explore Alita as she's kind of discovered and growing up, and then volume 4 you've got more about the motorball stuff. Now, after that original series, you've had a continuation of that. So you've got Battle Angel Alita Last Order and Battle Angel Alita Mars Chronicle. Now, Chris, have you got a bit of movie background for us?
I have, Dave, yeah. So the film was directed by Robert Rodriguez. Original idea to actually make a movie was by James Cameron. He was actually originally going to direct it, but in the end, he ended up being the writer and producer. He wrote the actual movie with Alita Colagridis. And the original idea, Dave, come around about 2000. James Cameron actually paid for a domain online, battleangelalita.com. And he talked about wanting to do the movie for a long time. Now, in 2003, the pre-production started for the actual film. And obviously, we're going back 16 years there. But James Cameron was also working on Avatar, and it got pushed back completely. So this went on now for 14, 15 years before we actually got a solid, yes, they're actually going to make it. The actual script was that long, and James Cameron was going to direct it, that he had to take a step back. It was like 600 pages of dialogue, and he just physically couldn't get it into a movie as such. So Robert Rodriguez came in and offered his services and said, let me try and make it into a film. And once James Cameron had looked at what he'd chopped and how he'd made it and the production of it all, he went up with Rodriguez to direct it. Now, what I find really interesting is he used a lot of the techniques that they used on Avatar with the CGI. There's a lot of people online, Dave, as you were mentioning before regarding Captain Marvel, a lot of people online, there's a big dig at this production, a big anti-Alita movement, I suppose you could call it, where because Cameron wanted to use a totally CGI main character, it just got panned completely. The first trailer came out in December 2017 in cinemas, and it was real lukewarm, Dave, to the point where there was more negatives than positives, and it really did hit. So they kept putting the film back. It should have been released in July 2018, and again they moved it to September, then December, and then finally it came out in February of this year, 2019. Now, what I find really strange is Avatar for me at the time was an absolute technological wonder for what it is. But for some reason in 2019, a lot of the people just weren't invested in that, the sort of promo to the film and the fact that her eyes were so big. And there was comments by some of the critics saying that, yes, the CGI is absolutely amazing. Credit to the actors who are acting with a green screen character, very much like the Andy Serkis stuff that he does in some of his films, like Planet of the Apes, stuff like that. But they said the fact that they made her eyes bigger and her face more CGI, it took it away from what they think the story should have been about. So this was something that was in it before it came out. Now, budget-wise, at the moment, he's not doing great. The budget was 170 million. And that was also one of the reasons that Robert Rodriguez came on, because they needed him to trim down the story because of the budget, because it was good. They didn't want it going over 200 million. Now, as of today, it's made 137.1 million worldwide. But it is on target, to be fair, of making between 350 to 400 million. But the IndieWire, who are quite reputable online, they reckon it's going to be nearer to 5 million. But also, with it being a manga and anime property as such, it's out on Friday, the 22nd of Feb in the Asian market. So I think it's going to do really well. If we can look at what happened with Aquaman, and that hit over 1 billion, and that was a lot to do with the Asian market. I think something that's from the Asian origins, I don't see it being anything other than a success. I'd be happy to sort of revisit that in a few weeks or maybe a couple of months to see, but I think this could hit over 1 billion, Dave. So I'll keep an eye on that one. Review-wise, it's mixed review. It's at 60% on Rotten Tomatoes after 247 reviews, with an average user rating of 6 out of 10. Everyone's saying, yeah, it's a great spectacle CGI-wise, but the story falls a bit flat. On Metacritic, it's at 54% out of 100. That's a 47 critics reviews. Again, mixed user reviews as well. Now, the Cinema Score review, the audience Cinema Score, which I do mention, which has a scale of A+ to F, at the moment it's at A-, which is absolutely really good. This is just the audience views on the film. Mm-hmm. On post-track, it's at 78%, and a user definite recommend at 59%. So it's positive, and it's interesting, again, that the critics don't view it as the audience, as we mentioned quite a few times recently. Now, it's set up for a sequel. They've already announced on February the 6th that they're going to bring Battle Angel 2 out. It's in sort of pre-production, and the reason that, spoiler, Edward Norton plays a main character in it but doesn't speak is to set up the actual sequel in it. So I think we get that, and I'm sure it's something we'll get into when we review it with the film. But yeah, that's about it really this week for Movie Dave.
Very good, very good. So I guess they're not an obvious pairing, are they, James Cameron and Robert Rodriguez? I mean, he typically does things on a much lower budget, doesn't he? So we looked at Sin City all those episodes ago, From Dusk Till Dawn, we've mentioned we both really like. And James Cameron, he's more of, forgetting his kind of early days, the original Terminator, he's more of a big budget guy, isn't he? And so it's interesting, those two working together. And really, this is, I think, Rodriguez's first real big budget film, isn't it?
Yeah. I got a lot of respect for Robert Rodriguez. You have, Dave, as you just mentioned. And I think it should be a formula that works. Whether we get into the review, we feel the same. I'm really interested in your thoughts on this. But yeah, essentially, he is a tried and tested, battle-hardened, fantastic director. And James Cameron, for me, is always going to be the Terminator, Dave. I know we've had Avatar and that, but it's just amazing. He's an amazing director. These two of my favourite films, The Terminator and Terminator 2 Judgment Day. So,
yeah.
And his CGI work at Avatar set the standard, Dave. Even now you can watch it. And so, you might say it's a bit of a tech demo. It was a bit light on the story, but as a spectacle, it's fantastic to actually watch.
Yeah, what did you make of Avatar, actually?
I thought it was I was in awe of like the 3D and stuff like that, because it was when we just bought a 3D telly when it came out and all that. But as an actual film, I wasn't that bothered that they haven't made one for 10 years or whatever it is. And I know he's supposed to be making back-to-back films, but it seems to have gone on the back burner. I'm not really that bothered, to be honest, Dave. I didn't think the world was very believable. Does that make sense? I didn't feel like there was a lot of life in that world he was trying to create.
Yeah, so the reason I asked, it was a little bit of a fishing question, because I thought you went there and you just thought, visually, this is phenomenal. And you're kind of taken away, I'd seen it in the cinema in 3D and just kind of blown away by it. But then, it's after the movie, so if you watch a really, really good movie and you can discuss it with your friends and stuff, or go on a podcast and discuss it, and I just thought, it got worse the more I thought about it. I was just thinking, it's kind of quite bland, really. Visually stunning, but not much of a story, and I don't think I ever need to see it again. And it'll be interesting when we do our review to compare those two. Yeah,
I agree, and I mentioned it. Avatar Collector's Edition is in my Blu-ray collection, Dave, and I've never watched it since I bought it. And it's there, and I paid a lot of money for that one as well, because I think it's got 2 or 3 different copies of it. But I agree with you. I don't think I've ever wanted to actually dust it off, to be honest. It seems to be one of them. Yeah. It seems to be one of them films everybody bought at the time, but nobody watches. I don't know about you.
I think it's like I say, it's one of those where you're sort of taken away by it and you think, oh, what a great movie. And then you sort of think about it after and you're like, no, it wasn't really. Again, utmost respect for doing that on screen. But I think when it's not a great story, it really reduces that rewatchability factor.
Yeah, it does. And I think for Avatar at the time, I thought we were on the verge of a Star Wars like Juggernaut, with a world of
like a real franchise.
Yeah, a proper franchise. And I could never understand why James Cameron never jumped on that, because it was well received, to be fair, Dave. Even from a tech point of view, it was seen as like a flag bearer for proper CGI, wasn't it? So I can't understand it's taken so long to get anywhere near actually making the film. But, you go and watch it. Without a doubt, we'd go and watch it. But again, I'm not that bothered. It's not like I've absolutely missed any of it, because I haven't. I couldn't even tell you the story now, Dave, to be fair, other than Sigourney Weaver and that. I couldn't really tell you.
Yeah, a bit like Aliens, wasn't it?
Yeah, I'm not.
You've got this government organisation trying to manipulate things. That's about as much as I can remember.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm not a big fan of Aliens, Dave, which might be sacrilege, but it never really...
Oh, that is.
Yeah, sorry, everyone.
We won't disappear off a rabbit hole there.
No, not at all.
Hi, I'm Mike from the Genuine Chit Chat podcast, where we have honest conversations with interesting people. I speak to a wide variety of guests, including CEOs of businesses, psychologists, authors, musicians, travellers, people suffering with physical and mental illnesses, and everyone in between, where we speak about a large variety of topics, including music and movies and pop culture, but also some more controversial topics, including drug reform, political correctness, and many more. No subject is off limits. You can find us on all the usual podcast places, including Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts, as well as on YouTube. And you can follow us in all the usual social media places. And to be clear, I don't expect everyone listening to enjoy every episode of my show. What I do think is that due to the wide variety of guests and topics, that there'll be at least one episode that each person listening will enjoy. So if you still appreciate the art of conversation and want to hear honest conversations with interesting people, then be sure to check out Genuine Chit Chat in all the usual places.
Okay, so today we've got a really special guest joining us today for our review. It's Andrew Davis, who's the founder of PopAnimeComics.com. So first of all, welcome to the show, Andrew. And what can you tell us about PopAnimeComics.com?
Well, thank you for having me. I'm not really that special. It's always nice to be appreciated, though. And Pop Anime Comics is a website I created where I write about anime, comics, pop culture, professional wrestling. And I try to do maybe 70, 80 articles a year on a variety of comic books, breaking it down, talking about anime, talking about a little bit of wrestling, and anything else that really fancies my background, because I love anime, I love comics, and I'm a pop culture junkie. And out of that, I've created a podcast called the Pop Anime Comics Lounge, where I interview comic writers, artists, voice actors, professional wrestlers, and cosplayers. And again, anybody who interests my fancy, occasionally I'll throw in an author that I like. I'm bringing it back in April, I should say. So in that batch that I'm bringing back, there's a movie called Punch Escrow that's coming out with Tal Klein wrote it. And I had the opportunity to interview him. So I do people like that who are in the pop culture sphere. And then on top of that, I public speak at anime and Comic Cons on a variety of topics, everything from Attack on Titan to Osamu Tezuka to comic book investing, and I'm always adding new concepts, and I love all of this. And so my entire project, if you will, / side hustle / business I'm turning it into is based on my background of a love of anime, comics, pop culture, and how I've been indoctrinated since the age of 5 all the way up to now I'm 26. And it will be a constant part of my life.
Awesome. So I think there's quite a lot of crossover between your interests there and our interests, obviously, because Chris, we've not converted it into a podcast yet, but you do a radio show on wrestling, don't you, or the combat stuff?
I certainly do, Andrew. And as soon as you said wrestling, I was like, yep, I'm definitely... I mean, I'm 40 now, but I've been watching the wrestling since the late 80s, and I'm a massive wrestling fan. And I'm like a historian with wrestling. I can watch and study all sorts of stuff. I love all the just pre-WWF stuff, WWF and things like that. So, yeah, I'd be really interested in getting your views on that, actually, down the road as well. Obviously, not for this show, but definitely, definitely. I absolutely love the wrestling.
No, I love all of this. Pop culture is becoming bigger and bigger and bigger, and we're seeing that now with everything that's coming out in our society. Where, I mean, what we're going to be talking about, obviously, today, not to segue in, but, you know, it's clear that this invasion has come to America. And I know that you guys are in the UK, but I would imagine that it's also invaded the UK a lot from Japan. And I use the word invaded because 20 years ago, this stuff wasn't the mainstream, and now it's become that. And that's what I focus on as a business. And even wrestling has become the mainstream. I mean, you have WWE, which used to be, it was, I mean, in like 94, it was more or less kind of underground and frowned upon. And now WWE is one of the safest plays in media, which is a change in culture. And so I think a lot of the stuff that 20 years ago, when you were, 20, was that. And now it's becoming mainstream, and all these people are now into it, and you have new fans and old fans, and it's just wonderful. And that's what I've figured out in my projects about everything that's occurred, is that there are fans from every generation now.
Yeah, I agree as well. I think it's become more common because obviously ourselves and our interests, we're quite, people just called you geeks or whatever, but we're not. Just because you're into a comic or you're into wrestling and stuff, it doesn't mean you're interested no different than anyone else is. And I love the fact that everyone's more honest. You've got guys going to the gym with the SpiderMan T-shirts on, Superman T-shirts, stuff like that. No one's bothered. When I was younger, it was always like a, cartoons type situation or whatever. I could never go in the gym with a Superman T-shirt on because you'd either got to be superhuman strong or you've got to love the business. So it's just something now in the way the world is. Everyone's more accepted that we all love that escape from reality, I think.
Yeah, I think that also it's cool now. Superman's been around for 80 years. Spider-Man is starting to approach that. It's 50 plus years at this point. Maybe it's 53 or 54 years old at this point. And so now that how many things have actually been completely indoctrinated and survived? I talk about Superman because it's one of the best arguments. Same thing with Batman, which is approaching 80 this year. One of the things is that how many things from 80 years ago are still relevant? 80 years ago, like 1939? How many things are relevant from 1939? You can't, an iPhone's like 11 years old? Yeah. So, there's maybe a handful of things that are still relevant from 1939. And I think it's the same thing with wrestling. It's the same thing with Star Wars. I just saw the Gundam movie, and it's a bit off topic, but Gundam's been around for 40 years. Star Wars has been around for a little bit longer than that. And that stuff, once something stays around long enough, it becomes relevant and it becomes part of culture. Look at Pokemon. And I think that's something that deals with anime very much right now as well, where you have this old school position, and once something stays around long enough, it becomes indoctrinated, and then we get this influx of things that might be a bit more new school, but the genre has made headway into America and into the UK and into, Western society, for lack of a better word here. And I think that's something that is nice. What
do you think the current landscape is? So with anime and manga, and obviously our choice of the week that we're going to be looking at and discussing in more depth, Alita, for me, it's been a little bit hit and miss when they've tried to bring, manga to the big screen. But I just wonder what your perspective is on that.
So live action has been hit and miss. As far as bringing movies and anime movies to the big screen, we're coming off of the Broly movie. So anything that is animated that has been in America, so Broly and the remake or the reissuing of the first Pokemon movie that came out in December that was playing, those were massively successful. So any new anime movie that's coming out that's animated with more in the cartoon form, for those who are unfamiliar, the Broly movie made over $30 million, I think. It might have even made more than that. So I think as far as that genre and that position, those are successes, and I want to separate that. I don't know how the Gundam movie that I just saw last night for 40 years did, but from my understanding, it's a success. But the live action stuff, some of it's okay, and some of it's a nightmare. You can't sit here and tell me Ghost in the Shell was great. And it's not because Scarlett Johansson is not a good actress. The movie was a failed conception from the start. The Dragon Ball Evolution movie was a failed conception from the start. And so I think that type of stuff is very problematic. But then again, I also think that we're getting a live Hero Academia movie, supposedly. We're getting a live Attack on Titan. But then we also have those Death Note stuff that is on Netflix. And that stuff's pretty good. It's not wonderful, but it's decent. I would say it's a lot better than Ghost in Shell. And maybe that's not big screen movie stuff, and maybe Netflix has a different approach. But I think that it really depends. But I think it's really hard to go take an anime concept and then translate it into Western culture and expect it to do well, because there's too many barriers. And also there's too many fans that know the original product, and certain things work in an anime that can't work in a live action film. You can't make, I'll give a really good example of that from the opposite side. You can't make Fast and Furious an anime. It wouldn't work. It just wouldn't work because you can't do it. I mean, you can physically do it, but the story and the animation and the style and the pacing just wouldn't work. And so that's the opposite way. So certain stories are told in certain mediums that work really well and others don't. I think that's why it has failed in America for the majority.
Yeah, no, I really like that analysis there. I just wonder, again, I've heard the theory that, Western directors, they just don't get like the manga stuff, the way of storytelling as well. And I just wonder if as we get more successes, will that eventually change? I mean, last week we reviewed the 1977 SpiderMan, and I can tell you the latest batch of Marvel movies are 1,000,000 miles away from that movie. I don't know. Have you ever seen that one?
I haven't, and I don't want to.
We didn't either. It was a vote off our Twitter poll.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. It wasn't the film I remembered it as being a kid. It was absolutely. I actually enjoyed it for all the wrong reasons with this one. I'm usually quite critical, Andrew, but I was actually enjoyed it and scored it in the middle on our review scale because it was just nonsense. The whole thing was just, I don't know. It was like a slapstick soap opera of Spider-Man. It was just an absolute joke of a film.
And I don't mean to bash Spider-Man. I love Spider-Man. I have a bunch of cool Spider-Man comics, and I just don't want to see it. It doesn't sound that great, and then there just sounds better films. I'd rather see like Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. To be honest, I'd rather see Into the Spider-Verse again. Yeah. It just, you know what it is? It's too far out of my reach. Where there's probably a bunch of better products or a bunch of worse products that might just be even more fun to talk about than that.
Yeah.
What I would say is I think you could probably, I mean, it's all there on YouTube, so it's way past, anyone actually caring about the rights for it. But, I mean, there's about a 5-minute fight sequence, and it is just pure comedy.
You've got to watch it. Andrew, you've got to watch it just for the fight scene. It is a thing of beauty for all the wrong reasons. It's like the three of us going in the room with no real knowledge. I'm not being disrespectful. I don't know your background, but say we have no real knowledge of stunt coordination or fight background or whatever, and coming up with a fight, and it's just terrible. But it's funny as well. I really enjoyed it because it was just awful.
Well, anyway, I noticed from the website as well, Andrew, that you seem to be going issue by issue on The Walking Dead as well. So how long have you been on that series? Because you're up to 188 at the moment. So have you been right there since the start?
So The Walking Dead, I came into The Walking Dead around issue 98, and I read all the way up in the trade paperback. I didn't start breaking it down till I would like to say maybe issue 140. So I've been breaking it down for the better part of 4 years. Issue by issue for the most part. I think I missed one issue in that train just because I'm a human being.
Life gets in the way, doesn't it? Sometimes
I'm a human being, and sometimes you just miss something, and sometimes you got a lot going on. But the reason why I actually broke it down, it's interesting. So I do this panel called Exploring Dystopia through Anime and through Attack on Titan, The Walking Dead, and Fahrenheit 451. And so I review Attack on Titan on YouTube, episode by episode, when it comes out. And then I do The Walking Dead on my website because I have 45 minutes at a convention with this panel, and we go through a lot of stuff, but also I don't know where everybody's at. And so the YouTube stuff actually subsidizes that panel. And then the website stuff subsidizes the Walking Dead component. And I didn't want to do just Attack on Titan on my website and The Walking Dead on my website. I wanted to diversify my media and break it down in a different path because I want people to go in different ways. Because I don't just do the Attack on Titan and that's it on YouTube. I put up my podcast and other things. And so that was sort of the reason behind it, is that it was to subsidize an existing product. And so now I have 3 forms of media versus one, because my panels are live streamed on Facebook. and they're usually up for about a month. So I'm multi-diversified. But I've been on The Walking Dead. I'm all caught up, and it's an amazing and arguably the greatest comic ever written.
Very good, very good. So on that bombshell, should we go into our review?
Let's go.
Initially, we're dropped into this future world where we've had something called the Fall, which leaves the Earth completely devastated. And we join Dr. Dyson Ido, who's played by Christopher Waltz, and he finds a disembodied female cyborg with a fully intact human brain while he's out scouting at the junkyard. Now, Ido takes her back and he rebuilds this cyborg and names her Alita after his daughter who'd previously died, we find out a bit later. Now, Alita has got no recollection of her past and she's experiencing the world for the first time. She meets up with a chap called Hugo, who he's dreaming of moving to this sky city called Zalem. And basically he introduces her to the concept, the game of motorball. Now, Andrew, what did you make to this whole opening to the movie?
I mean, I think it's world building very nicely where we kind of get thrown into a world. And we get thrown into this beautiful world, for lack of a better word, that's not really all that beautiful in the scheme of things, but it's kind of new, fancy, and we also get exposed to a lot of the cybernetics. And it's also very touching in many regards that Ido kind of rebuilds Alita, gives her a body, and then she's almost learning along with us as an audience what exactly is this world. And it's very much like a panacea moment, I think. And I find it actually to be kind of peaceful and nice. And it's nice to have a character that doesn't know anything about her. And it's almost like the audience doesn't know anything about this world. And I thought it was a nice parallel that they did where we're not learning through Alita's eyes per se, but we're kind of learning with her. Where sometimes movies will give you a nice back history and will give you and kind of tell you what happened. All we know is that the fall occurred and then this is the world, but we know nothing about Zalem. We know nothing about Alita, and we're kind of learning about her world and the world she's in at the same time that she is. And it's nice to be with a character instead of experiencing it through the character. And it's almost like we're a spectator and we're learning with her. And there's a learning curve that the audience was learning with. I felt, at least.
Yeah, I think world building through this whole movie is absolutely the term that comes to my mind. And I wonder if they prioritized world building over just telling their story a little bit, quite honestly, from my perspective. I mean, Chris, what did you make to this opening piece?
I think what Andrew said is correct. I am invested in this world and everything. I genuinely am. I think there's a lot of potential for it to build. But I've got to say, now, Andrew, I will call stuff out. So if you disagree with me, just tell me. It's no problem. I watched it with my wife, and I'll be honest with you, she absolutely loved it, my wife. Absolutely loved it. I have a lot of problems. I think Hugo is the worst actor I've ever seen acting with a green screen actor. We've talked about this earlier, Andy Serkis type job, because Alita's CGI, I felt the story was quite weak, I've got to say. I thought it was too rushed and convenient, and especially at the start, the way he found her and all that. But I do agree, I think the world was fantastic. I think the CGI, the special effects, there's not been a lot of stuff that's better out there, but I didn't buy into it, I'll be honest with you. I just thought it felt a bit like, and me and Dave have said this earlier, Avatar to me, where there was a lot of razzmatazz and thingy, but I don't know, it just didn't pull me in. I was expecting a lot, and I didn't feel it at the start, I must admit.
I mean, I get that. And I understand it, and it was a little too convenient, for lack of a better word, that all this happened. I mean, the fact that obviously I don't want to. I'm going to table what I'm going to say, because the third act, I think, really delivers a point that we learn more about Alita, but the fact that she was found and that, I mean, just to spoil something, I mean, the story takes place over 300 plus years without giving too much away. And the fact that she was found 300 years later kind of raises questions. I mean, it's a flaw in the movie's concept.
Yeah.
Where and it is a major flaw, because the fact that we're talking 300 years from really start to finish of at least the first movie, you know, that's a major flaw in everything that's occurred. And furthermore, I mean, I thought it was very much a nice father and daughter movie to some degree, where you have Ido, the father, and he lost his daughter, and then he's treating Alita like his daughter. And like, we get that beautiful scene where she's out late with Hugo, and he says, your brain needs nourishment. And like, you know, it's the type of movie that I don't have a kid, but if I had a daughter, I would want to bring my daughter to that movie type of situation, because it was nice. At least the first act was to that regard. And so I think that's something that's very cool. And then just as far as world building, I think one of the things that they were betting on, and there's articles on this, so it's not really my original thought, but I've read a lot on it, is that they really did invest a lot of time in building this world. And from my understanding, they want to do many sequels. And so it could very well be that this movie isn't so much about the story as much as it is about building a world so that you get 4 more sequels, like Avatar's getting 5 sequels. And so if you go into it with that mindset, it does change it a little bit, because now you understand that maybe they spent half the movie building out the world and they took a gamble to say, hey, we now have this world and we now have these different things. Because if you go back to the manga, there are things, there are prequels, there are one-shots, there are chapters, there are sequels to the manga. And so, because the manga, I think, was only 9 volumes. And then you have like a sequel and then you have a prequel. So there is, if you build the world the right way, which is what I think they were doing or attempting to do, you could then have those sequels and spin-offs, which is where the money might come in.
Yeah, absolutely, and I agree. They were definitely doing a lot of that. What I would say is, you know, Christopher Waltz, I just think is absolutely brilliant. He didn't really have a great deal to do in this movie, but, and again, we were talking about Bernthal having a great range. You know, I think Christopher Waltz here playing Ido, he plays a Geppetto type character, doesn't he? Like you say, very, very nurturing. Now, if you go and watch Inglourious Bastards, you'll see a different side to him, the type of character that he can play. But yeah, I think for what he had to do, he was really good in this. I think for me, the world that it was building looked fantastic, you know, and it looked expensive, didn't it? It looked like you were seeing something on screen that was a little bit like Avatar, and it cost as much, which I don't think it did cost as much, but, you know, it was certainly impressive. But considering how junkyardish and, you know, this Iron City was supposed to be, it seemed remarkably clean to me, you know, and when she bumps into Hugo, I don't know if you guys have ever seen Disney's Descendants at all. It's all about, you know, the offspring of Disney villains, and it looks like it's very much filmed in a studio, and it's all just very sanitized and clean. And I just thought it all seemed too clean for me. You know, you've got cyborgs running around and stuff, but it was very bright. You compare it to something like Blade Runner, which is all very dark and dingy, and we beat up a little bit on Warner Brothers and DC for being too dark and dingy, but that's because we're talking about Superman at that time. For me, I think this was a little bit too bright and crisp and clean. And I also thought, I've heard a lot of praise for the guy who plays Hugo, but I thought he was a bit of a tool. I was questioning his motivations straight off the bat. You know, he takes for this Alita character who's experiencing the world for the first time in a childlike way. I think this guy who's in his late teens, early 20s takes an unusual liking to her. So I don't know. I didn't like him at all. He just did my head in straight off the bat. But I'm not checked out of the film at this point in this first act. Like I say, it was very impressive. But those are the things that jumped out for me.
I didn't mind it being clean. Like, I read a lot of dystopia and it's dark. And my entire thing is that I didn't mind it being clean because it's the future. And I took that, look, this is a clean dystopia, but you also get those dark moments where, we get those dark moments where people's parts are being swiped and that there is a black market. And I thought that was a nice contrast where on the surface, this looks like a clean entity because of Zal is up top and that Zal is this clean city. And that I kind of thought it was a nice contrast where, look, this looks pretty underneath and it's a bit rougher. And also, it also looked a little bit cleaner because a lot of these people have cybernetic enhancements and that they have cybernetic modifications to cope. And so I thought it wasn't so much, I thought it looked clean, but it really wasn't because you see all these people with cybernetic hands and you see all these people with cybernetic bodies and you have to ask yourself when you're watching this, why did they do that? What happened to make them want to do this? And so, while it looks a certain way and it looks really aesthetically pleasing and it's not dirty, if you notice, almost every character has some form of cybernetic component to them. Ido's assistant has a cybernetic arm. And I don't know about anybody else, but, you notice that right off the bat. And, it makes her work easier when she's, like, cleaning up Alita and all that stuff. And even, like, with, like, the surgery that she's doing. But even still, you have to ask what happened to her arm. What type of world are they living in where somebody has a robotic arm?
Yeah. So, it could either be they've been dismembered, in a fairly brutal way, or, like you say, maybe it's a choice thing. If she's augmented herself to make her job a bit easier, that's an interesting perspective.
Yeah, I think as well, though. I think it also goes back to building the world. My personal opinion, I think that a lot of the stuff is quite unnecessary. Has Ido got any sort of enhancements? He seems to be untouched. He seems to be... Am I wrong there, guys? I don't actually remember his character actually having any body dysmorphia or any robotic parts. Am I correct in that? He seems to be like the only one, and his wife as well, or his ex-wife.
Yeah, I don't think he had any. He'd come down, hadn't he, from Zalem, along with his wife, played by Jennifer Connelly. But yeah, they seem to be one of the few who didn't actually have some kind of cybernetic enhancements.
I must admit, I have a big problem with his wife, Jennifer Connelly, because he definitely pulled an egg out of that.
How can you have a problem with Jennifer Connelly?
No.
She's lovely.
No.
The character.
The character. Because Ido, when he pulled her, got married to her, he was on the best lottery ticket we've ever seen. He definitely got all the numbers coming that day because he's punching well above his weight, and there's no way they didn't look right as a couple. I just wasn't buying that they were ever married. It just seemed a total mishap. I just didn't get it. I just thought that was, I don't know. Her whole introduction in the film was just, I don't know. But he definitely should not have been with her because she was far too pretty for him.
Well, they were both into the same. They were both cybernetic surgeons, weren't they? So maybe they met through work. But yeah, or Christopher Waltz. He's not going to get too many movie roles where he's got someone as lovely as Jennifer Connelly to play alongside, is he?
Oh no, she's a pretty lady, really pretty lady. So we're at the middle part of the film, and this is when it sort of heats up a little bit. So Alita's seen that Ido keeps coming back to the sort of house that they're in, and he's got blood on his hands. She's been watching through sort of half-open doorways. She thinks something's going on. Now, they're sort of foreshadowing that he's some sort of bad guy. So she decides this night to actually come out and follow him as he goes out. He has like a big trench coat on. And what she actually finds out is actually he's a hunter warrior. And he's actually hunting down these sort of dangerous cyborgs within this world. So Ido ends up down an alleyway and he's basically outmatched by these three cyborgs. Now, Alita turns up, sort of stands in his way. He's worried about Alita. We then get introduced to this absolutely humongous cyborg who's a Gruishka, who ends up being sort of the main antagonist for Alita through the film. And she gives them what for. She kills the two other cyborgs, the lady who's got the big sort of spiky hands, the sword hands. Then quite gruesome, actually, for the film as well. There is a few quite gruesome bits as well, so be warned, guys. And Gruishka actually escapes and he ends up at Vector and Chiron's lab and explains that, you know, he needs help and they could, you know, going to rebuild him. Now, at this point, Nova then takes over Vector's body and we get the whole Blue Eye situation where he's talking through, and again, props to the acting, again, fantastic acting. But Ido, again, you know, Alita had gone into sort of battle mode when they were fighting from nowhere. It was like on instinct. She's just turned and pulls this sort of Jackie Chan-like karate stance and goes full on into the battles and the fighting. And totally our characters to what we've seen. We've seen within the film that these things are going on with Alita and a couple of flashbacks. We know that she's more than just a cyborg sort of girl at this point. And then Ido sort of discourages Alita from becoming a hunter warrior because she's really frustrated and she wants to sort of get involved in this world that he's in. And then we get the point where Hugo and his friends take her to this deserted ship, which is out in the countryside, which is a bit out of place, really, considering the world that they're living in. And it's in like a little lake, and it's this massive ship, and she gets... It reminds me slightly of the Man of Steel stuff with Clark when he goes to like the North Pole or the Antarctic, wherever it is, to, you know, the Krypton ship, and she gets on there, remembers how to do it, and finds this berserker body. And she then takes it out, because after 300 years, this ship still actually works, even though nobody has been able to work it. She obviously knows, as she's, you know, an ex-warrior and part of that army. But at this point as well, Gruishka's upgraded himself by Vector and Chiron, and he's massive. And, you know, Alita goes into this bar, and this is probably one of the best scenes of the film, and she sort of fights a few bounty hunters. Ed Screen's in there, the English bounty hunter, very much looking like RoboCop with a mohawk, and she beats them all up, basically, and then does a bit of a Braveheart, you know, let's get together and band together and we'll do this and we'll become a team. And they all sort of laugh at her. And then she ends up fighting Gruishka, who drops her down and sort of makes a massive hole in the floor. And she has a battle with him. But because he's been upgraded, he actually takes her out and he slices her up. And luckily, Hugo, Ido and another hunter warrior actually come down and manage to chase him off. And he goes off. At this point, for the second act, Ido then transplants the conveniently placed berserker body, which he'd foreshadowed that he wouldn't put it into her body because of what it's capable of, and conveniently she's now got the berserker body. So that's sort of like the second part of the film, a middle section. What did you think to all that, Dave? I know it's a lot to take in and a lot of different talking points, but summarise what you thought of that.
Yeah, so just a few points that jumped out to me. Like I said earlier, I love Christopher Waltz as an actor. I think he's brilliant. But there is not 1 second where I am buying him as a hunter warrior. I can buy him as the surgeon. I can buy him as the Geppetto type caring father. I can get all of that. But I just... So going back a little bit, we are seeing a little bit through Alita's eyes, you know, some of the suspicion, because we get these reports of late night murders, and, you know, she notices that Ido's coming back. He's acting suspiciously. He's got kind of blood on his coat, and so that's why she ends up going out there and following him. But when he sort of encounters those 3 cyborgs, I just thought there's no way I'm buying that. And so I don't know what you guys made of that aspect to it.
No, my favorite entire scene in the entire movie was the bar fight that took place with the Gruishka scene and all that, and how that entire thing broke down. And then, because Alita wanted to form a band of hunter warriors, and they all basically got into a brawl fight, and then he comes in and says, "No more free repairs." And then it's one of the funniest scenes in the entire movie, because everybody stops then at that point, which is one of the funniest things. But yeah, and the other cool thing about the bar, and a bunch of people didn't pick it up, is that it says Kansas on it, because the manga actually takes place in Kansas. Which is kind of cool, and that's actually where supposedly all this is taking place. It's actually not taking place in Japan, and that was a nice little touch that I thought they did in the movie. And it's
that's
like
a really good catch. That I didn't see that at all. Really good catch.
It's a nice Easter egg, and then the sequel to the manga also takes place in Colorado, so it's actually taking place in America, and the manga took place in America. So I don't know if technically the movie took place in America, but the bar says Kansas where that happened, and obviously it's a crucial scene. But yeah, I don't take him, as a hunter warrior. It just doesn't add up. It's weird to that degree. But I think it goes back a lot to this father scene, where he's very believable when he's trying to forbid Alita from doing that. And he's like, I don't want you in that berserker body, where he's protecting her. And it's almost like a father, protecting his daughter. And it's, in my opinion, that's a very believable scene.
Yeah.
And so I think it's really nice with all that going on. And I thought the fight scene, and I thought even her just losing was nice too, where in the body that was his daughter, because I thought that was kind of nice, where that kind of puts his daughter's body at rest. And in many ways, I take it as a closing form, where it changed their relationship, because it kind of transitioned him, because he put Alita in his daughter's body to some degree. And I felt that he was trying to almost relive what happened, because we get that scene where, like, he had a patient who was looking for drugs that essentially killed his daughter. And so in many ways, the fact that that body got destroyed was closure for him, and him putting Alita in the berserker body is almost a new path and a new chapter, and it is almost closure. And it's even to some degree closure for his wife. You can make the argument, which affects the third act, which, I'm assuming we're going to get to, but I don't want to spoil anything before we get there. But you could also, because at the start of the movie, to just backtrack, his wife saw their daughter's body, or what was supposed to be their daughter's body. And so, that, I think in both regards, that ends sort of their closure with their daughter to some degree, and the fact that she's actually dead. Because her body is still there, and to some degree, Ido was selfish with that, and that's why he didn't want her to become a hunter warrior, and didn't want her to stay out late. And so it's very much that closure. I think that's really what one of the things that jumped out to me in the second act was that.
I must admit, now, I don't know whether are you a gamer at all, Andrew?
A little bit.
Yeah, well, what it reminded me of Christopher Waltz as the Hunter Warrior. Now, I've just completed, again, Zelda Breath of the Wild on the Switch. So when you play these games, it reminded me of the fact that you've run out of swords that are agile and that. And he had to fight three of the biggest people and scariest people ever, the slowest weapon ever. Now, I've just completed Zelda, and you have axes, you have big clubs and everything, and they're good if you need to get one shot on them, as you know that they're going to kill him. But he was never going to win a fight against them guys, because as soon as he swung that thing, he was not big enough or strong enough to wield it. And it just reminded me of a computer game where you've run out of weapons, your sword's gone or whatever, you've got to wield whether you can pick up, and I just didn't believe it. him as a character or that fight scene, he was always going to get that stuck in the wall. And I just knew, I don't know why, whether it's because I'm a big gamer, I was thinking he's definitely come out with the wrong gear on tonight as Ido, definitely.
It was more like Reinhardt without any armor from Overwatch.
Yes.
That's his weapon. Legitimately, that's his weapon, because if you actually look at Reinhardt's weapon, it's a gigantic, I guess, hammer, for lack of a better word, that has a rocket in it. And when he swings it, and Reinhardt swings, that rocket moves, and you can actually see it in Overwatch.
Yeah.
And that's what his weapon was. It was legitimately Reinhardt's, club.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I'm a Soldier 76 type of guy. You know what I mean? I just shoot everyone. So that's me all over in Overwatch. But yeah, I agree. It just tickled me because I thought we just picked the totally wrong. It's like the old Sean Connery in Untouchables when he says to that guy, he goes, typical. He brings a knife to a gunfight. He just you've brought the wrong tools for the fight tonight, Ido, But anyway, I didn't buy him as a character. That just was me. But also, again, as you mentioned before about Fast and Furious, I know it's a different comparison, Andrew, but it felt like Hugo and his mates who were ransacking these guys who were playing, this motorball game. It felt a bit like the start of Fast and Furious when Vin Diesel and the guys are robbing the vehicles and no one knows who they are. And all the way through the Fast and Furious film, we allude to the fact that they think it's them, but they're not sure it is. But it is. But this seemed to get closed out pretty quick. It didn't make any sense for this Hugo character, who was a guy of total morals and looked like a good standing citizen, if you can call him a good citizen, where he lives, and he's helping Alita to then on the side become this sort of vigilante mugger who steals. I know he's trying to get to the world above, but I just didn't buy that he had this sort of double life schizophrenic personality. It just didn't sit true for me. He was too nice to be doing this, and I didn't believe that he had the tools to take down these motorball champions as well. I don't know about you guys, but for me, I just didn't buy any of that at all.
I think what I'd say is, so the original manga series was the magazine that it appeared in first. It's very much pitched towards young adults.
Yeah.
So if you think movies like Maze Runner, The Hunger Games, things like that, it's like teen fiction. So I think I'm not saying that to excuse it, because I get your point. Again, for me, I just think Disney's Descendants, that's just what it appeared to me. I mean, someone who's doing that kind of job, going out, stealing these cybernetic enhancements and putting them on the black market, you'd imagine if that was real life, they'd be pretty distasteful characters, wouldn't they? They wouldn't be these clean-cut, kind of late teen, early 20s young lads.
Yeah, that's true. And
I think as well, we've focused on, it's probably my fault, but Ido, and not buying him as that hunter warrior. But I guess in that scene where where they first encounter the three cyborgs, we're supposed to see it more from Alita's perspective, because she's gone from, biting into a whole orange, because she doesn't know how to eat an orange, to suddenly becoming this phenomenal martial artist where she kills off two of these cyborgs and only just the other guy, Grishka, only just manages to get away. This huge built, big hulking of a guy, which I only realized after watching the movies, played by Jackie Earle Haley, who's Rorschach, and who's also in Preacher as well. So yeah, I think maybe if you were younger, you've probably seen it more from that perspective.
And also, what we have to realize is that the manga was done almost 20 plus years ago, and the style in Japan was very different. So we have a product that with the manga and reading the manga was 20 years ago. And so if this manga was done 5 years ago, that style would be different. It's the same thing with Akira. And I hate to go off topic, but I think it'll come full circle, is that the interactions in Akira is very different because the style and the literature elements and what people were interested in Japan at that time were very different than 30 years after. And it's the same thing with this manga, where Battle Angel Alita was like in the 1990s. And the 1990s had a particular animation style. I mean, this was the Dragon Ball Z era. This was the Sailor Moon era. This was the Slam Dunk era.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this was that type of era where there was a particular type of human interaction, a particular type of trope, and the Hugo trope and the Ido trope is common during the 1990s, all the way from 1990 to about 2000. And so if we're going to go, this is based off of that. So it's kind of that way where in 2019, we have a lot of anti-heroes. We have a lot of anti-complications and complexes that take place. And we have more interesting character development and I think that James Cameron and Robert Rodriguez wanted to be more purist to that degree. And I think that's part of the problem with this movie is that they have a movie coming out in 2019 that was probably started to film one in 2016, 2017, maybe even a little bit earlier, from a product that was 20 years old when they started to film it. And there's a disconnect between that. I think that's really evident with the Hunter Warrior component, where there are elements of this that are modernized and there are elements that aren't. The Hugo character is not modernized, and that character needed to be modified more so than Ido. If they left the Hunter Warrior part alone, but they fixed Hugo's character, the movie would have been that much better. Because you have like a failed anti-hero complication that's not an anti-hero.
Yeah, I think that's an absolutely great point, to be honest, Andrew. I think that explains exactly the downfall in his character. And there's a lot of potential there for, if they're building this world, there could have been potential for movies for his character. There could have been different things, not even to take it away from Alita. There was so much potential with who he was, because he was trying to improve his life, wanting to get onto Asylum and that. But yeah, I agree. I do agree with that. He was very much something stuck in an era gone by. And I know this film's been in development for over 20 years, so with James Cameron, so maybe it's something that he stuck to his guns on. But you are right, it did seem to miss a beat with what we expect these days in films. It was very much a throwback to something from a bygone era, really.
And don't worry about going off topic, Andrew. That insight and knowledge from the manga side, from that Far Eastern side, it's absolutely brilliant, because I that's a bit of a blind spot for me. So really interesting to hear your perspective on that.
Oh, brilliant.
Well, what I'd just like to say as well, when we have Maharaja Ali, I think that's almost right. He was awesome in the first half of Luke Cage, I thought. Unbelievable actor. Again, a little bit like Christopher Waltz, I would say, didn't have a great deal to do in this movie. But absolutely, you know, when he's playing himself and then he's taken over by Nova, I absolutely believe that he's two different people there. Yeah. I just think this guy is just phenomenal. Like I say, even though he didn't have really that much to do. Now, I've seen it a little, it's been dotted around my Twitter, different people suggesting maybe he could be the next Blade. And if there was a vote for it, that'd get my vote. I think he'd make an absolute fantastic Blade.
He's a good actor, great actor. And like I say, Luke Cage alone as Cottonmouth, he was fantastic until obviously... Spoilers, guys, if you've not watched it, but he killed him off far too soon. But that was to do with his commitments in other productions, wasn't it? But what a great actor. And I've still not seen Green Book, which is supposed to be really good, with Viggo Mortensen as well. It's a different, another range as well, Dave. And is it True Detective Season 3's in as well?
I'm not sure. So the only other thing I'd seen him in was Luke Cage, and you know, that particular season got a lot worse when he wasn't in it.
Yeah.
I mean, he was really good as Vector, and you believe him in everything he was saying. You know, he really. I mean, I guess he was the enemy to some degree. I don't know fully if he was what I would call a full villain, because he was kind of playing, I guess, his best hand, for lack of a better word. And he also brought up some really interesting points with Hugo, where he said, we could be the bottom up there, or we could live like kings down here. And I thought that was really, really interesting. And I thought that, like, just when he was in every scene, like, I felt like he was commanding the scene. And then when the Nova switch happened, I thought that was really cool too, because that's kind of, I think that's hard to do, because he has to now, he's not doing the Nova voice and his eyes change, but he has to express certain body expressions from like an outside voice. And that's probably not an easy thing to do as an actor. And I thought that it was really believable. And I thought that his body expressions and his body language throughout the entire film was really commanding as the top dog. And I think that's something that was just really cool that they did with him. And I'm really upset that he got killed off, because I think that if they're going to make a sequel, which they want to, and from my understanding, and it's on the table, I would have liked to see him in the next one. Yeah, because I think there's a lot of potential that can be done with him.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I agree. He seemed a bit too cheap. Then I know we're going to get into that in a second, but I agree, Andrew. I think his range of acting, and just in some of the things he does, his mannerisms, he's very, very understated, but really, really good actor. Really good actor.
I mean, I think it was on par. We've talked, Andrew, quite often about Christopher Reeve's Superman. For me, there's no one who's played Superman who has that duality that can transform his body, his mannerisms into Clark Kent like Christopher Reeve did. The other example I would give is James McAvoy in Split and also Glass, where he just transforms in front of your eyes. There's no CG or anything, and he just becomes a different person. And I think this performance was on par with those.
Yeah, I do. And I do think this, once we've got over the first bit, for me personally, I think this last bit of the film is fantastic. I think, we're getting into some great choreography and fight scenes. They're just amazing. It's really good.
Can I just ask, did you guys see this in 2D or 3D?
I was 3D IMAX.
Ah, right, okay.
I only saw it in 2D because I don't want to spend the money for 3D because it was a big price difference.
Man after my own art there.
No. No, let me just say, guys, there is a story behind this, Andrew. So I'm not trying to be like I've got loads of money or flash or anything. I'm not. What happened was me and my wife have what's called an Odeon Limitless card. So we pay £18 a month, which is probably about $22, $23 a month. And we get to see as many films as we like in 2D. Now, me being the idiot that I am, didn't check the times properly on the Odeon app. I went for the 11:40 showing in 2D of Alita because I said to my wife, I'm not paying for IMAX. I will for the Avengers or Captain Marvel or whatever, if it's something I'm really into. And I got the time wrong. So we couldn't stay for the 1 o'clock showing of Alita, which was actually in 2D. So I had to pay an extra £10, which is about $12 to watch in IMAX in 3D. So I've got these glasses again that I don't need. I've got about 20 pairs of IMAX glasses, and I was out of pocket even more to watch it. So it was better watching it in IMAX, but that was not my intention. It wasn't to, think I'm better than you guys. It was purely me not checking my surroundings and checking the app correctly. As my wife of 20 years actually told me on numerous occasions that I was an idiot because I didn't check what time the film was on. So that's the story.
I think it's potentially a happy accident because I must admit, I mean, some of the fight scenes are just phenomenal. And as I was watching it, I was thinking, you know what? I bet this would look really good in 3D. When Grishka's kind of blade fingers are coming out and you get almost that bullet time Matrix style fight choreography where she ends up getting sliced in half pretty much. I just thought that looked brilliant in 2D, but I thought, that probably looked really good in 3D.
Would you like me to ruin the illusion? Or
was it not?
It was no different. It didn't make any difference. It was like watching the Star Wars films in 3D when I went to see the Force Awakens and I was so excited to see the Millennium Falcon in 3D and the lightsaber battles and everything. And it was nothing. And what I end up doing, I don't know about you guys, I end up doing this with my glasses when I'm watching it, because there's loads of scenes in this Alita weren't 3D. It seems to be just as the body's turned, it changed. And I always do, I don't know why, but it didn't make any difference that it was in 3D. The only good thing was it was in IMAX, the screen. It looked fantastic on the screen, but I didn't get anything out of it in 3D, I'll be honest with you.
All right, okay. Oh, well, you shot me down there, because I know a lot of them, today they make a lot of movies, don't they, which are shot in 2D and then it's converted to 3D after, whereas I thought, well, with this being James Cameron, and I know Rodriguez was the director, but I just thought, a lot of the scenes were specifically for, and I'm thinking of the fight scenes here, I thought they were specifically for being seen in 3D, but okay. There goes that theory.
Well, that's my opinion. So if you want to watch it in 3D, please watch it. That's just what I didn't get anything out of it, I'll be honest.
Well, that's all we can do is give our opinions, isn't it? So after an off-screen discussion with Vector, Hugo convinces Alita to try out for Motorball, which she agrees to as a means to get him up to Zalem, which, he's been pretty consistent about all the way through the movie that he wants to get up there. Now, before the tryout, Ido actually recognizes that the other contestants are out to kill her, and they're basically working for Vector. Hugo tells his friends that he's done with being a cyborg jacker, but he's starting to be hunted by Zapan, who's played by Ed Skrein. Now, Zapan frames Hugo for murder, and Alita catches up with them both, so she manages to escape from her tryouts and being killed there. But Zapan mortally wounds Hugo and states that Hunter Warrior law dictates that one of them has got to finish him off. Alita takes Hugo into a deserted building where she ends up attaching his head to Alita's heart. Zapan sees what's happened, and Alita slices half his prized face off and takes his sword. Now, Ido ends up transplanting Hugo's head onto a cyborg's body and tells him that the only way he would have got to Zalem was to be Motorball champion. Alita then goes to confront Vector, and Vector orders Grishka to kill her. Now, Alita kills off Grishka, and then Vector, who's just before that moment is being possessed by Nova. She tells Nova that he shouldn't underestimate her. Meanwhile, Hugo attempts to climb to Zalem, which he's again been pretty consistent about, and Alita catches up with him, but this spike defense comes down and Hugo ends up falling to his death. A few months later, Alita's competing in the Motorball tournament and points up towards Zalem, where Nova's watching down. So, Andrew, what did you make to this whole third act?
I liked it a lot. I thought that the third act was the strongest component of the movie. I also thought that we kind of got the most history out of the third act, and that, we kind of got sort of in the second act and in the third act, we got a little more of the background of who Alita is. And the fact that I was alluding to it before, where this is a 300-year process, and that entire system, I guess, because a little bit of the background is that obviously there's a conflict with Mars, and there was all these sky cities, and Zalem was the last sky city, and Alita more or less failed their mission because of that spiked, system defense. And so I thought it was very nice and very poetic, the fact that it kind of ended there, and the movie, that was one of the big scenes where the movie ended. And so I thought that, like, the big spike thing was really, like, the climax of the entire movie, where it was the failed mission for Alita and her unit to really deal with and Zalem. And that, but at the same time, I thought, like, Hugo's death was bizarre because they just saved him, and they just made, like, a big, 15-minute deal about saving Hugo, and Sharon basically almost committed a suicide mission to save Hugo, and then Hugo dies. And so I thought, like, that was the weakest component of the third act, and I thought it was a bit bizarre, where you save him, she knows that she's pretty much going to die, and that's alluded to, and that, she risks it, and then he dies. Like, what was going on with that? Because that was the weakest part, in my opinion, of the entire movie, because it was almost like, a victory where you won and Alita wins, essentially, that entire fight. But the victory is so great that it's a loss. And there's a word for it, and that's slipping my mind. But, like, that's how I took that entire thing. I thought it was rather bizarre.
Snatching defeat from the jaws of victory.
Yeah, I mean, it was bizarre to me that Hugo died because, and I get why he had to die, because if they're building a sequel and they're obviously going to build something, and if they build the sequel, it's most likely going to take place in Zalem, which would make sense. And in that, we're going to get the showdown between Alita and Nova, and I'm not going to ruin the manga for anybody, but, you know, obviously there's a lot of history and that there's a whole new world to explore, which I thought was a nice touch that they didn't really go into Zalem yet, and that they didn't really show much of Nova yet, and they didn't really show any reason why. But at the same time, it was also bizarre because how the hell is Nova still alive? Because he was alive from 300 years ago.
Yeah, I
guess we'll find that bit out. What about yourself, Chris?
I'm pretty much with Andrew on this end bit. I mean, Hugo, I didn't shed any tears when he got sliced and diced by that machine. That machine obviously must get WD-40 put on it because 300 years earlier, it nearly took Alita out, and then 300 years later, it does the same thing. I think the fight scenes in this, and like I say, are fantastic. The action and the violence is brilliant. You know, there's no, as much as it's a 12A in the UK, what rating is it in the US, Andrew?
I think it's PG-13.
Yeah, PG. It's a 12A, so roughly about the same thing in the UK. And I don't think, you know, and there was one bit in the film where she drops the F-bomb, and there was a family in front of me with some kids who were about 6 or 7. And, the mum was reaching across trying to grab him and everything. So I liked some of the things in the film. But, yeah, this end bit, I don't know. I just felt it was a bit weak. It didn't really explain what was the reasoning behind going to Zalem for the whole film. It just felt like it was this mythical place that dumps rubbish down on the guys below. But there wasn't really any logical explanation why they wanted to go up there. And I just thought it was a bit weak. And the way Hugo went, I was not losing any tears. He may come back because he seemed to, the way he got sliced up was almost a bit like how they found Alita at the start of the film. Is somebody going to find him and resurrect him because he's pretty much a cyborg now? But I've got to say, at the end, the character of Nova was almost like a baddie out of a really bad cartoon because I didn't like the glasses he had on. It looked really out of place for the actual film and the world they were living in. And then they revealed that it said Norton, and I was like, I don't really care, if I'm being honest. I just really had no interest in him as a character. He just felt like a really poor baddie out of like Scooby-Doo or something. He was just terrible. I just didn't get it, unfortunately. But yeah, what about yourself, Dave?
It was strange, wasn't it? Because, you know, we'd been introduced to Nova and we'd seen him with the glasses on, and then he takes his glasses off and it's like Ed Norton, and just exactly the same as you, Chris. I'm like, but I don't care, really. You're revealing to me it's Ed Norton, and I think I'm supposed to be like, oh, God, it's Ed Norton. But as much as I think Ed Norton's a decent actor, it's not. Look, if it was Mark Hamill or someone like that, you know, I'd probably been like, oh, wow, you know, but it was like the reveal wasn't the character. The reveal was the actor. And so I did think that was a little bit strange. And as I said right at the top of the review, that, you know, I did not like this Hugo character. And he just come across to me as just being hugely selfish. Like you say, I think Vector had said that Sharon's body parts had been harvested. So she's already been killed off camera for saving his life. And he's just abandoning everyone. He's got his cyborg body, and he'd mentioned earlier, you know, if he had a body like Alita's, then he'd walk right up that cable. So, you know, as soon as he's able, he's willing to abandon everyone and then just suit himself and go off to this Sky City. So, yeah, no tears shed from me on Hugo's part, I have to say.
It was weird where it's just like they didn't mention anything about Zalem or anything like that. They didn't mention anything about Nova, and it's a big risk that the film is taking by really focusing in on everything that took place on the ground, because I mean they just dropped $170 to $200 million into a film, and they didn't mention anything about any of the higher up villains. I mean, we get Vector and everybody who's working for Vector essentially is the main villain in this film. And so they're taking a big risk by revealing Nova at the very end with no information, showing who the actor is. Nova has, 6 speaking lines in the entire film. And so it's like a really bizarre ending to me. And it's a bizarre film because in many ways they're taking that huge risk of it attempting to do well at a box office. And we could argue that maybe it's done well, maybe it hasn't. I mean, it's cleared, I think, like 140 million domestically and maybe 56 million at best internationally. And then it's going to be going up against How to Train Your Dragon. And then in March, it's going to be going up against, if it lasts that long, against Captain Marvel, which means that it's going to dwindle excessively with both of those films. And so it's really bizarre where I think the movie will break even, but I don't know if it's going to get a sequel. And I think that's part of another reason why this movie, I don't want to say failed, but it's struggling.
Yeah, I think what you just said is exactly how I'm feeling. It felt a bit of arrogance at the end when they revealed Nova. It was like we should care about a sequel or want a sequel because they revealed who he is. And like you said, Dave, I just didn't care. I mean, it's not like you're watching Harry Potter and it reveals Lord Voldemort and you're like, oh my God, I can't wait for the next film. Or these are, like when you do get these films that drag in, like the Avengers, the Infinity War, a perfect example. We're all waiting for Endgame, or I am waiting for Endgame, Andrew and Dave is. And I can't wait to watch that film in April. Now, I just wasn't bothered. I was just like, well, what am I expected to do? Go, oh my God, run out of the cinema and go, is there going to be another one? Let's get online and look. I just wasn't that bothered. And I think it was a bit arrogant, in my opinion, to even think that people would want that without even knowing how the film's going to be down the line. I don't know. It felt a bit too forced for me, unfortunately.
So the Gundam movie just came out. It was a one-night special. And at the end, they revealed Gundam Hathaway Flash, which is 3 novels that are getting 3 movies. And everybody in the theater cared about that preview. And it was like the first preview that came out of that movie. Everybody gave a damn about that. So it was like, oh, man, this is going to be great next winter. And this is a year out. Oh, man, I'm stoked. Like, everybody cared about that. And like at the end of the third Avengers movie, everybody cared about the Captain Marvel preview, where that scene of him, Samuel Jackson character Nick Fury calling Captain Marvel, everybody cared about that. Like, nobody cared so much about Nova's revealed. The shot of Alita pointing, the sword up was cool to Nova, and then you see Nova, like, it was kind of cool, but like, there was no real, like, I give a damn about this moment, and I feel that it was almost a forced situation. I feel that it would have been way cooler if she points the sword up, it cuts there, and then it goes into all the credits, and then there's a preview scene at the end. Like, that to me, of Nova, like, acknowledging it, like, that to me would have made it care more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because it would have been like an afterthought, and they would have teased something, and they would have thrown, like, very much like Fast and Furious does now, and all the Avenger movies, and even like the DC comic movies do, where they do that like end scene in the middle of the credits. Like, there was no caring about this at all, because there's not a reason to care.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
Great point.
I do just want to bring up, because I'd mentioned SpiderMan 1977 before, and I'd mentioned about seeing that fight scene just for pure comedy. And I'd pointed out to Chris that the scene starts off, so Spider-Man, he comes through on this skyscraper, he comes through the window, and he encounters these different, very stereotypical, very 70s racist Asian, basically karate type fighters with kendo sticks, and he'd climbed through the window. He encounters one, and then he's backing up, and then one appears from behind a curtain, and you realize that, well, actually, he was already behind the curtain of the window that Spider-Man had climbed through. Now, you mentioned about convenient, it being convenient for that first act. And I thought, we'd been with Hugo, he'd been chased by Zapan halfway across the city, and eventually he's cornered Hugo and Alita's caught up with them as well, somewhere in the middle of this city. She goes into this derelict building. What was Sharon doing in there? Why was she there? Conveniently, so she can saw his head off surgically and attach it to Alita's heart, to keep him alive. I thought, for me, convenient was absolutely the word I was thinking there, because I was just like, oh, come on. I mean, I can buy cyborgs walking around. I can buy a lot of this stuff, but that for me was just lazy writing.
Yeah. I must admit, David, until you've just said it, I didn't even notice, but yeah.
All right, maybe it's just me then. All right.
No, I think you're right.
And also, where did Sharon? She's a cold-hearted bitch, for lack of a better word, throughout the entire movie. Where in the hell did she shed off that cold-hearted bitchiness? And I'm going to say it bluntly, to want to now care. I mean, right from the start of the movie, and you get that from, Ido and her, and that's probably why partially their marriage failed, is that she is very cold. And then all of a sudden she becomes warm.
Yeah. I guess it's a bit like Hugo, isn't it? These characters, they don't have arcs. They're more like just right angles. They just, they're operating down a particular line, and then they just change completely.
In the defense, I mean, we're talking about 9 volumes of a manga. So clearly in a hour and a half or 2 hour film, you're not going to be able to punch it in the same way. Where in a manga, you either are doing it weekly or you're doing it monthly. And so clearly you're going to have more time to develop a story. So I would imagine that if we all read the manga, we would say, this is pretty good, and this might make a lot more sense, and there might be a lot more back history. And, so in that defense, I understand why some things happen, but even still, they could have done less is more, and they could have had more story in this. They could have made things a lot smoother, and it doesn't excuse the fact that you have 2 hours to do something to make it rough, which is what this was to some degree.
Of all the different comic book movies and TV shows that are out there, I think Marvel, certainly on the movie side of things, hits it out of the park more consistently than anyone else. And I don't think they do that because they're faithful, 100% faithful to the source material. I think they understand the essence of the characters. They understand telling a story. And I think that's the kind of formula that seems to work for them. Whereas I think when you try and be too faithful to the source material, that's when things don't translate from one medium to the other very well. So you're absolutely right. Maybe, reading more about the books through that series would help you understand. But for me, it's another misstep in terms of just tell a story. You've got an hour and a half, 2 hours to tell a story. Just focus on that, and that's where the misstep is for me.
I mean, I think in many regards, what might have made this better is that if they said, "Look, we'll just make 2 movies, and that will put everything into 4 hours." If you look at Kill Bill. Kill Bill originally was supposed to be 1 movie, and then the reason why you got Kill Bill 1 and Kill Bill 2 is because Tarantino couldn't do it in 2 hours.
Yep.
And so he needed more time. And so, to some degree, if they were going to build this world, I mean, that's what they did with The Hobbit. They broke up The Hobbit into 3 movies, and I mean, it's 9 hours. It's probably 3 hours too much if we're going to analyze it. But even still, though, you have the time to properly build something out. And I feel that with Alita, you're building this world, and you got this amazing world. You got this aesthetic world. You got the world to play with, where you have all the tools in 2019 to go and build this world that was done in a manga and really deliver a beautiful world. I mean, there's no denying that this is one of the most beautiful worlds in the last 10 years in anime and film in general, brought to the big screen. Maybe what they should have done is they should have said, we're going to do 4 hours over 2 movies, and that they should have had more character development and it should have been less rough. I mean, because it's a rough movie to swallow, because it's like, I want to like the movie, and I do like the movie, but there are a lot of flaws with it.
Yeah, no, that's great. I agree. I think it's about time we went into our review. You ready to go into the review, Dave?
Yep, let's go.
So, Andrew, what we'll do, I'll run down our review scale. So it's a 5-point scale, but it's very in keeping with the comic book world. So if the film is absolutely the best thing you've ever seen, you absolutely love it, we send it to Asgard. If it's still a great film, but just not at the pinnacle, we send it to Atlantis. If it's middle of the road, it's not good, it's not bad, you've enjoyed it, we send it to the Halls of Justice. If the film is like taking slightly a bit of a dive and it's not very good, and you've not really enjoyed it, we send it to Hell's Kitchen. And then if it's the worst thing you've ever seen, we send it off to the Phantom Zone with General Zod. And most of the time, I send it off to General Zod's toilet as well when we send it to the Phantom Zone. But yeah, so the Phantom Zone is the lowest of the low.
I mean, I thought it was middle of the road, so I'll send it to the Hall of Justice. And I thought that world building is really what sells it, where I think that clearly money was put into it. There was a lot of effort that was put into really building a unique world. And it's nice to see something that I wouldn't say is realistic, but could be at some point, where I don't think that in 300 years that what we saw is unrealistic. And I also thought that it was just really cool. It was clean. I thought it was an interesting take on a dystopia, because that's how I viewed it. I thought it was interesting to that realm. I thought it was very much in the style of anime and how anime is done. But at the same time, there were a lot of flaws just as far as characters, where Ida was really well done. Vector was well done. Alita was extremely well done. The eyes didn't bother me. I liked her eyes, to be honest. I liked the anime cyborg eyes. I thought that was interesting. I like the entire concept of Alita and the Berserker. I just felt that Hugo and Fruitia, and even just the Nova reveal, and the fact that we didn't have anything from Zalem involved in this film, and that it had a bit of arrogance towards it, which we spoke about all throughout this, where it's almost kind of a sequel is expected to clean up the first mess, or at least complete it, because it feels incomplete to some degree. And so I like what they did. I like the fact that there is a big world to explore, where I could see a direct sequel and I could see an indirect sequel at the same time. And I could also see a prequel to this. And I could see a completely different story taking place within this world that has nothing to do with this movie, but they now have built this world and they could jump off of it into some other story. And so that's kind of why I say it's middle of the road, but higher up in middle of the road versus lower in the middle of the road, if that makes any sense.
No, it does. It does. What about yourself, Dave?
So for me, visually, very, very impressive. And again, I'm going to jump on that term of world building. This absolutely was a world building movie. Now, I do think it's a huge gamble to go with that, because if you look at, let me take an example of Star Wars. So that was a world building movie, wasn't it? But that was hugely commercially successful. Now, I think at the moment where we are in the box office, it's not a huge success yet. That might change when it opens up in the Far East. It could blow everything out of the water, in which case the gamble will have paid off. And then we could be looking back in a few years and saying, okay, all the groundwork was done in that first movie, and then we had this series of unbelievable to watch, but also commercially successful movies in the future as well. But I think where we are today, I just think there are a lot of problems with it. And I think, it wouldn't have been a gamble that I would have taken. I could have absolutely done without the love story aspect to it. I think you've got this very strong female character. It seems to be in keeping. So we've got Captain Marvel obviously being released next month as well. So I think for that, it's absolutely fantastic. But I think the whole love story aspect to it just undermined all of that. Just, again, let her have her moments, let her, be this kick-ass, young girl cyborg, and that's the end of it. She doesn't need to be validated by having a love story. And it kind of reminded me a little bit of Daredevil 2003, where, again, a lot of that story just focused on the love story aspect. Whereas when you went to the director's cut, they cut all of that stuff out and it was a much, much better movie for it. So for me, I couldn't make my mind up. I think the acts are very different. I thought the third act was the strongest as well. Just, again, the effects, the fight sequences, unbelievable. Ed Skrein did a brilliant job again of just making me hate him. Whenever he's on screen, it doesn't matter what role he's playing, if he's Ajax in Deadpool or if he's in Game of Thrones, there's something about him that I don't like, and he's doing his job from that perspective. But yeah, so having said all that, for me, it's bang in the middle of the road again. And we've reviewed a few things over the last few months where there's been a big discrepancy between the critic scores and the audience score. For the moment, this is probably the first time when I'm going to go away from the audience score. This is a 94% on Rotten Tomatoes at the moment for the audience score, but I disagree with that strongly. I'm going to come more back to the middle of the road again, probably right in the middle. Holds a justice for me as well. Chris, how about yourself?
Well, I'm going to tear it to pieces, gentlemen. I'm not going to lie. I thought it was the biggest waste of my life watching this film. I thought the love story, Hugo, nonsense. I think the fight scenes and CGI, fantastic. I can't disagree with that. I also agree that there's a world there that I would be invested in another film. But I've got to be honest, I wouldn't be wanting to invest in Alita. I think it made no logical sense to have this motorball thing. It just seemed to, all of a sudden, this motorball tournament became the most important thing in the film when it really wasn't for pretty much half of the film. And then all of a sudden it was very important. And I actually thought the English assassin, who is like the main, at the start, what was he called, Dave? The English one? Ed Skrein. Yeah. Ed Skrein. I thought he had more layers to him. He should have been the main bad guy villain for Alita, not the big guy who actually, I don't know whether you get this reference point, Andrew, but I'm a massive Gears of War fan, and he reminded me of Marcus Phoenix out of Gears of War. This character, the big chiseled, you look like a big steroid bad guy, but I actually think that Ed Skrein should have been the main bad guy. And I just thought he was poor. I thought the story was poor. I thought he was weak. I didn't buy into it at all. I come out of it, and me and my wife come out of the film, and we both look at each other, and I said to her, so what did you think? Now, she's usually, Andrew, more critical than me, and she's like, I absolutely loved it. And I went, that's one of the worst films I've ever seen. And Dave, I've not said that for a while. But,
and we watched SpiderMan 77 last week, so that sounds right.
SpiderMan 77, for me, he's good for all the wrong reasons. This felt like it was a story that should have been told in the 90s, and it was James Cameron trying to show off what CGI he's got ready for Avatar. So for me, I'm sending it off with General Zod to the Phantom Zone, never to be seen again. And I hope that he stays in the Phantom Zone with Ursa and Nom like this in Superman 2, and they're stuck there on the screen, never to get out, because I thought it was rubbish. I'm off my pedestal now, Andrew. I'll get off my little rant I've just done. But yeah, I just thought it was rubbish. I'm dying to swear and say what I really think, but I won't. But there you go.
Say what you really think. Yeah, get off the fence, Chris.
Yeah. But that review needed some swear words, and I'm not going to say them. But yeah, anyway, there you go.
Awesome. Well, let's wrap it up there. So, Andrew, do you want to give us a few plugs for what you're doing at the moment?
Yeah, sure. I'm writing on my website, so that's popanimecomics.com. You can check out my podcast. I'm planning to release now, hopefully in April. So that is Pop Anime Comics Lounge, and that can be found on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher Radio, and I think 25 other directories. So if you just Google Pop Anime Comics Lounge, it'll come up. My Twitter handle is @PopAnimeComics. I need the follows because I have like 415 and it's slowly dwindling, so I really do need follows. My Instagram, I put a bunch of Pop Funkos and comic book stuff, and that is Pop Anime Comics. You can like my Facebook page. And the cool thing about my Facebook page, so if anybody's interested, I do all these panels at Anime and Comic Cons, and I live stream them on my Facebook, and they're available for about 3 weeks after. And so, you should always be checking because I do post, and that's completely free. All you got to do is like my Facebook page, and you get to watch a panel for free, and you don't even need a ticket. And I might not legally be allowed to do that, but I'm going to do it anyway. And
why not?
Anything that's Pop Anime Comics is mine, or Pop Anime Comics Lounge is mine. So check it out. And I also tweet a lot. I post stuff up, post really cool articles up on my Facebook page all the time, 5 to 7 a day, just on news. So definitely check that out. And that's about it.
Oh, thank you. That's really good, that. And ourselves as well, if you want to get in contact with the show, guys, it's on Twitter @ComicsinMotionP, and on Facebook, it's Comics in Motion Podcast. And then also, please subscribe through your podcast hosting site and give us any 5-star reviews because it helps us grow the show. So, Dave, what a great episode today. And I just want to thank Andrew again for coming on. But, Andrew, we're at that point of the show where Dave's going to take us out, aren't you, mate?
Well, I'm not going to use an Alita line. I'll use the line that I used before. So thanks again to yourself, Andrew. And all I'll finish off with is say, with an average podcast comes no responsibility.
Goodbye.
The woman in my memory called me 99.
What you saw was a flash of your previous life.
Who was I?
In time you'll remember.
I'm a warrior, aren't I?
Welcome to the underworld. From here, there are worlds above worlds above worlds. It's where I used to live.
And it's where you're going to die.